And so the pressure builds. We called the video yesterday the most important weekend of Max Verstappen's life. And that, of course, it is, because if he finishes more than 18 points ahead of Lewis in this penultimate round of the 2021 World Championship, he will be world champion. Never before has Max experienced a weekend like this. And never before have we seen anything like it in Formula One, I think. Max out right at the end of Q3, the pole there for the taking. Purple in Sector 1, where he'd been quick throughout qualifying, quicker than both Mercedes consistently through that tighter, slower section. The increased downforce, the superior downforce of the Adrian Newey Red Bull Honda giving him that grip and Max maximizing it. Sector 2 was very quick as well, through those blind high-speed S's, through the banked turn 13. All that remained was Sector 3, which is largely straight line. On his previous quick lap, which wasn't good enough for the pole, Max had said, I need a toe. There was no toe there, but magically, maybe it was Honda, maybe it was something else, maybe it was the wind, 3-2-1 in a straight line. Lewis had done 3-2-6, Max 3-2-1. It looked as if the pole was on. He was purple, but then coming into the last corner, he locked up, going into this relatively innocuous left-hander, ran a little bit wide, tried to stay on the power, blipped the throttle a little bit, try and get the back out, but hit the wall in doing so. And very quickly, a gearbox change, of course, being subject to a 5-place grid penalty in Formula One these days, he stopped the car, got out and got a lift back towards Parc Fermé. A disappointing day for Max, of course, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Lewis Hamilton thus starts from the pole. Valtteri Bottas is alongside him. That's the protection that Lewis needs, because the bottom line is, if he doesn't finish this race, as any sort of mishap, basically the World Championship is going to go to Max Verstappen. We'd seen throughout yesterday and today that getting the red tyre, getting the soft Pirelli to work front to rear with a great balance was really difficult. It wasn't just a question of piling on laps, it was a question of how you did the slow lap, what sort of temperature you put in the front, what sort of temperature you put in the rear. And Carlos Sainz, very good example, didn't get out of Q2. Admittedly, he was on the medium tyre, but basically the same thing applied. The more laps you did, the better it got. But you had to do the slow laps in the right way. But let's get back to Lewis, because there was a lot of tension and a lot of pressure around Lewis as well going into Q3. And that's because 2 hours before in FP3 earlier in the day, he'd been very, very quick, P2 to Max, but he'd done that time on the hard tyre. Everybody else had been quick on the soft tyre, and Lewis on the soft actually went slow, a little bit like Max on Friday. So on the one hand, Lewis could say, well, I've done a 28.3 on the hard tyre, Max has done a 28.1 on the soft. That means on the soft I can be really quick. But on the other, Lewis didn't actually go any quicker on the soft tyre when he ran it later in FP3. So going into qualifying, as I say, big question marks around what the Mercedes would be like and what Lewis would do in qualifying to get the best from it on the red tyre. On top of that, there were 2 yellow flag incidents that Lewis had to think about between the 2 sessions. One of them was very quickly washed away, which was, did he slow or not for some double wave yellows? And the answer was, well, it came on by mistake. It came on for a few seconds and Lewis didn't get any warning anyway in the cockpit. So that was quickly thrown out. But there still remains a question of whether or not he balked, would you believe, Nikita Mazepin in Q1, going through one of the really quick corners, about which we spoke yesterday. And I'll get onto that again in a minute in this video, because to me, it's chillingly dangerous how these very, very fast blind corners bounded by concrete walls are characterizing this lap of Jeddah. Anyway, Lewis didn't get any warning, and to his credit, Nikita Mazepin just came through a blind left-hander, found Lewis in the middle of the road, and to his credit, brilliant reflex, it just went boom to the right. Otherwise, it just would have been a massive shunt. And Lewis just didn't know anything about it, saw this car go past and just sort of took his hands off the wheel in horror. You know, what happened there? So that Lewis had to take that into qualifying as well, which isn't a great thing to be doing. So let's look at what Mercedes did then going into qualifying, how they handled it. Well, it was interesting because they kind of split their options. Valtteri Bottas went into Q1 just doing one long run. He did a 9-lap run. He was really quick right at the end. On his 8th lap, he was P2. And Sergio Perez did the same thing, and he took fastest time in Q1. Max Verstappen didn't get a traffic-free lap in, but he was right there too. He only ran 1 set. But Lewis ran 2 sets and ended up P9. So that was obviously a worry and a concern for everyone around him. What would they be doing in Q3? Q2 kind of took care of itself because everybody was on medium tyres. But the last few minutes, of course, were focused on Carlos Sainz after that big spin he'd had on his first set of mediums. But nobody really noticed that Lewis had just stayed out on his 1 set of medium tyres, fast, slow, really slow laps. And on his 8th lap, probably his 4th push lap, he did a 27.2, which would have been good for the pole, of course, and was indeed quicker than he was going to go in Q3 on the soft tyres. So that 27.2 that Lewis did on the medium tyres stands as the fastest lap ever around this circuit, obviously, and the fastest lap recorded at any time during the weekend so far on medium tyres, on race tyres, if you like. Also significant, Lewis's top speed on that lap, 326 kilometers an hour. And at that moment, the fastest Max had been in a straight line was 323 with a tow and about 316, 317 without a tow. So big difference in top speed, but Max definitely quicker through sector 1. That grip, as I say, of the Adrian Newey Red Bull Honda, fabulous through sector 1. But both of them, all of them, everybody, just staggeringly impressive. We saw today, I think, what Formula One driving is all about, because there's no question that fast corners showcase the talent of these guys. And there was an interesting comparison in FP3 earlier when they compared Max with his teammate Sergio Perez going into turn 13, which is actually quite a quick corner. It's a fourth gear corner. And on that one, interestingly, Max is braking later than Sergio Perez. But of course, this isn't a heavy stop. This isn't a big braking stop. This is a corner where you need a lot of finesse and balance going in. And Max, of course, is going in probably left foot braking as he's turning into the corner. And that's kind of disguising who's braking earlier going into the corner. So yeah, that is a particularly interesting corner, I think, turn 13 with the banking, with the camber, but it also applies through those very fast S's. It seems just an endless run. And a lot of drivers saying that mentally it's a very, very tiring circuit. Physically as well, of course, it's pretty hot. We're talking 29, 30 degrees ambient, but mentally it is a very demanding circuit. It's a long lap and there's not a lot of rest, because even on the back half of the circuit in sector 3, when they're flat out in 8th gear, they're still turning left, and you've got to use the bit of road there that is the groove. You cannot just go anywhere as if you could on the straight. And there's this perennial problem with traffic. One of the comments on the channel yesterday was, I got to admit it, I love this circuit because it's so dangerous. And I got to take issue with that, because for me, the danger aspect of Formula One is a part of the risk a driver takes when he's going into a corner, trying to put that car through that corner on the limit. And obviously it's based on what is outside the circuit there and what he can potentially hit. But it's also to do with his feel and his judgment and his ability to be on that tightrope, as Sterling Moss always used to say. For me, speed differential, fast car versus near stationary or slow car, is not part of racing. That doesn't require talent. That is an incredibly dangerous thing. And of course, I speak as somebody that's seen serious and fatal accidents in Formula One due to speed differential. And I hate it. I absolutely hate it. And I have to say, watching qualifying today on board, going through those fast S's with Max or with Lewis or Bottas, whoever it was, I mean, there was a moment when Bottas and Kimi Räikkönen hit one another. I don't know what speed they were going. For sure they were doing 130, 140 miles an hour. And Bottas doesn't know that Kimi's coming past. And Kimi did really well. He almost got into Q3, I got to say. He missed out by 2/10, Kimi in the Alpha. And he hits Bottas's right front. I mean, luckily, he hit it such a way that it was just a glancing blow and they were able to bounce off one another. And there was no damage done. But I mean, this was so close to being a major, major shunt. And as I say, speed differential shunts, to me, it's, that's Le Mans. And that's why I'm not a massive fan of Le Mans either. And that's what this sort of circuit engenders, because there are so many blind corners and it's so quick. And the high walls make it very difficult for visibility anyway. And the marshals, actually, there was a point made about the Lewis thing that the marshals didn't get involved either. And partly that's because of the speed involved and because of the visibility, for sure. So, yeah, I mean, it's a very demanding circuit, and it's a great circuit probably in terms of its fast corners and its sequence of fast corners. And I'm sure as an individual lap, it's a great lap to drive for a driver worth his salt. But when you're combining very slow laps with incredibly quick laps, to me, it just sends shivers down my spine. I'm kind of still sweating a little bit from watching qualifying. Anyway, to get back to business, Carlos Sainz didn't make it through to Q3, and nor did Daniel Ricciardo, and he'd looked pretty good in the other McLaren Mercedes. And only Lando Norris actually had to resort to soft tyres in Q2 to get through to Q3. And he did a really good job because they put him out towards the end of Q2, I say towards the end, it's a short session anyway, just had like one lap. And we know how difficult it is to get temperature in the tyres. And he did actually do a lap good enough, quick enough to get him into Q3. So another good job by Lando Norris, and a good job, I've got to say, by George Russell again to get into Q2 in the Williams Mercedes. But anyway, we went into Q3 And then what was it going to be? As it happened, everybody did 2 runs in Q3, and it was very difficult because it meant having to get that balance, temperatures front to rear, absolutely right, basically out of the pit lane. And as I say, the pressure continues to build. Lewis almost dropped it on his first flying lap in Q3, had a big moment through the S, a sort of Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz type moment, but managed to come out of the throttle and just eased it onto the slight bit of runoff area on the left and managed to get the car back on the track again and to continue, obviously, on the same set of tyres. There's no flat spot or anything like that. And on his first flying lap, it effectively became a banker lap. He did 28.0 after that moment. Valtteri at the same time a 27.9. And the quickest on his first run, and therefore quickest at that moment of Q3 on the pole, Max Verstappen, 27.6. 316 kilometers an hour only in a straight line there. Thus his plea for some sort of tow going into the last run on his second set of soft tyres. That wasn't going to happen. I mean, it's a very difficult circuit to organise a tow. There are so many slow cars. I mean, Max's last lap at the end of Q2, he was purple, and as he approached the last corner, there was like 5 cars basically stationary. Luckily, he just came straight out of the lap, and that was it. But, you know, that's not, I don't like that. I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but it's not Formula One to me. I hate that business of slow or stationary cars. I've gone on about it enough, but that's what happened to Max on his second lap. Anyway, that took us down to the final runs. Lewis and Valtteri both out again on their final set of soft tyres, and both of them put in really good laps. Looked like Mercedes had got really on top of how to get the temperatures balanced front to rear, and a really good lap by Lewis, albeit still slower than he'd gone on the medium tyre in Q2. And then there was Max, who went out absolutely last of all, and he was out there, everybody watching, everybody at Mercedes watching Max on this lap. Yes, he was quick in Sector 1. He was always quick in Sector 1. Sector 2, though, is what did that lap for Max. He was really, really good at Sector 2. I mean, talk about shaving margins going through these blind S's. Just phenomenal to watch. And then came that big moment, and when he just lost it at that last corner. You know, I've gone on and on and on about Max and how he brakes and how good he is and the stable platform. And I think, what can I say? I suspect there was a bit of a temptation in this of all weekends just to brake that little bit later. And he did lock up the left front, and that's why he ran wide. And so what does that prove? That proves he's human, I guess. Yeah. Max Verstappen is human, but he's still P3 on the grid. And he's still in pretty good shape. Although, got to say, on race tyres, Lewis Hamilton, that 27.2 on the medium tyre, Q2. And then also in FP3 today, Lewis 28.3 on the hard tyre, compared with Max's 28.1 on the soft. And the fuel run yesterday, just to remind you of that, Lewis 33.8 well into his run, and Max a second slower 34.8. So that's not to say Max won't be a lot quicker with fuel in the car on race day, because he hadn't done much homework by then, as I say, but as I said yesterday. But that 33.8 by Lewis and that long run, consistently quick yesterday, and again his speed on the medium tyre. You know, it's his race to win, it's his race to lose in reality, and Lewis at the moment, things going in his direction. Give or take these dramas going on with the stewards. Let's just have a look at some of the other results from qualifying. I was going on yesterday also about Charles Leclerc's situation at Ferrari and how I felt that the politics of the Carlos Sainz side of the garage building up may be having some sort of effect on Charles' driving, psychology, you know, Italian stuff. And I think that showed today. You know, I think when Carlos Sainz started to get into trouble and had that initial spin and then didn't make it through into Q3, those are moments when a driver's confidence level in the other car can go boom like that, because all of a sudden I'm representing the team, I'm the guy who hasn't hit the wall, I'm the guy that hasn't spun. And I think we saw that today with Charles. I think that P4 of Charles Leclerc, A, brilliant lap, and B, I think that shows Charles Leclerc confidence back again. 28.4 on his first run, 28.0 on his final run, and very quick in a straight line. Usual thing, Ferrari's taking wing off, running the thing absolutely on the edge in terms of where they can be, to be quick on the straight, given their engine issues. 320, which is, you know, a little bit quicker than Red Bull on average. Fifth quickest, Sergio Perez in the other Red Bull, 28.1 on his first run, didn't go any quicker on the second. He'd looked pretty quick. In fact, he was quick in quickest in Q1, as I say, just doing that long run on soft tyres in Q1. But he didn't have anything like as long a run. In fact, he ran 2 sets in Q3 and 28.1. Bit disappointing from Red Bull's point of view. You know, when Max has a mistake like that, it would be nice to have seen him doing, what, a 27.9, 27.8 maybe, but he didn't, a 28.1. And I think for everybody else, Pierre Gasly, Lando Norris, Yuki Tsunoda did a very good job, Esteban Ocon, and Antonio Giovinazzi also did a really good job to qualify P10 for Alfa Romeo. I think for everybody else, it's kind of stories of traffic, as it probably is for Daniel Ricciardo as well. There were so many slow cars when you were out doing a quick lap, and equally, you had to do those slow laps in order to get the temperature into the tyres. It's one of these things. And it's a function, of course, of the relationship between grip levels, the compound that Pirelli have chosen to run, the type of compound you're on at any given moment, and the traffic around you and how many laps you can do anyway, given the time frame that you're in. So yeah, lots of variables in play there in terms of why there are so many slow cars on a circuit like that. Speaking of which, tyres that is, Pirelli have confirmed that there were no manufacturing faults in the tyres that failed in the Qatar Grand Prix, which is worrying really, because you'd prefer it to be a manufacturing fault because then you can kind of understand it. And then they go on to say, well, you know, in which case it was therefore due to curbs, temperature, undue stress, which is much more worrying because tyres, you know, go back to the old Patrick Head thing of suspension braking when a driver takes it over the curb. And Patrick would say, no, race cars should be designed to take curbs. And he's not the only engineer on the pit lane who would think that way. And basically, that's what tyres should be designed to do. These are the racetracks, these are the curbs, this is the corner. The tyres should be able to take it in the same way that the car takes it. So I think we go into the race tomorrow with a few unknowns also about tyres and curbs, only because it's hot and also because they're very fast corners with a lot of load going through the tyres for a long time. And so fingers crossed on that one. I hope it's okay. It looks like Pirelli are on the really conservative side here, and there's a very high grip level, which is probably a good thing, I guess, although it's going to put a lot of energy through the tyres, isn't it? So, you know, I guess it's best not to think too much about that at this stage going into the race. I think the thing that's happened today is that we've got 2 Mercedes on the front row, which is as good as you'd want if you're Lewis Hamilton. He basically has to win these 2 races in order to win the championship. And we've got Max Verstappen, despite a glitch today, despite the Hollywood ending, starting P3, which is no bad place to be. And alongside Max, on the dirty side of the grid, there's Charles Leclerc. And right behind him, which is probably a good thing, is Sergio Perez, his teammate. So potentially, we could have the 2 Mercs and the 2 Red Bull Hondas heading down to the first corner. We'll see what happens then. You know, this is... everybody must love this whole Max versus Lewis thing, and we saw real head-on, eye-to-eye stuff today. Even though they weren't looking into one another's eyes, they were looking into one another's eyes. And Lewis did that superb lap, and then Max was on that superb lap, and then Max made the sort of error that he never makes these days, under pressure, because this is a weekend when he could, on Sunday night, emerge as world champion. And I guess that's what ultimately is the great thing about this sport. I mean, people love to say, you know, golf or cricket or football, whatever it is incredibly unpredictable. But they're nothing compared with Formula One. When you think about the variables in play in Formula One, from temperature to tyres, to engines, to chassis, to starts, to first corners, to reliability in general, to driver performance, to driver consistency, to fitness, to mental strength. I mean, there's nothing like it. And we're going to see all that bottled up in the form of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, the first ever race in this country. I mean, for those guys in that country to be staging this race, it's just amazing, really, isn't it? And to see that all bottled up in one race start and the 1.5 hours or whatever that will follow afterwards, very quickly, because it's a fast lap, I think it's going to be one of the sporting events of the decade, really, let alone of this year. I can't wait to see that. See you then.